I was 19 years old when my father locked me in our basement and told me I would stay there until I agreed to marry his 55-year-old business partner, or until I died, whichever came first. For 8 months in 2019 I was a prisoner in my own home, surviving on minimal food and living in darkness. But during that isolation, Jesus Christ found me in ways I never imagined possible, and he would orchestrate my impossible escape. My name is Nora Al-Qahtani. I was born in 2000 in Riyadh into a traditional Saudi family. My father was a successful businessman with connections throughout the city's commercial networks. We lived comfortably in a large villa in an upscale neighborhood, and from the outside, we appeared to be a respectable, well-off family. But inside our home, my father ruled with absolute authority, especially over his daughters. I grew up understanding that my life had limited options. I would receive basic education, learn domestic skills, behave modestly, and eventually marry someone my father chose for strategic or financial reasons. My desires, dreams, or preferences were irrelevant. In my father's worldview, daughters were property to be protected, controlled, and eventually transferred to husbands through arranged marriages. My childhood was restrictive but not unusually so by Saudi standards. I attended a girls' school, had female friends from similar families, and accepted that my freedom was limited compared to my brothers. I wore abaya and hijab in public from a young age, never spoke to unrelated men, and understood that my reputation and family honor depended on my modest behavior. But I also had dreams my father never took seriously. I loved reading and excelled academically. I secretly hoped to attend university, perhaps study literature or education, maybe even work as a teacher before marriage. These were modest ambitions compared to what women in other countries could pursue, but in my context they felt like reaching for the impossible. When I turned 18 in 2018, I began hoping my father would allow me to enroll at Princess Noor University. Some families permitted their daughters to attend the women's university before marriage. I approached the subject carefully, explaining that education would make me a better wife and mother, that it would bring honor to our family. My father dismissed the idea immediately. I didn't need university, he said. I needed to prepare for marriage. In November 2018, my father called me to his study and informed me that he had arranged my marriage to Abdullah Al-Mansour, his business partner. Abdullah was 55 years old, already had 2 wives, and was looking for a younger third wife. The marriage would strengthen important business relationships, my father explained. I should feel honored to be chosen. I was devastated. I had expected arranged marriage eventually, but not to someone nearly 4 decades older. Not as a third wife entering a polygamous household. I tried to express my concerns respectfully, explaining I was only 18, that I hoped to study first, that I feared the challenges of polygamous marriage. My father's response was cold. The decision was made, the contract would be finalized soon, and my opinion was irrelevant. Over the following weeks I tried everything to change his mind. I begged my mother to intervene, but she said women must obey their fathers and husbands. I tried reasoning with my father about my age, but he said 18 was perfectly appropriate for marriage. I suggested waiting a few years, but he refused, saying Abdullah wanted a young wife now. Finally, in desperation, I told my father directly that I couldn't marry Abdullah. His rage was explosive and terrifying. How dare I refuse? What shame I was bringing on the family. His solution was immediate and brutal. I was taken to our basement, a windowless storage room, and locked inside. I would stay there, he said, until I accepted my duty. The basement was approximately 10 by 12 feet with concrete floor, bare walls, and a single dim light bulb that my father controlled from outside. There was a thin mattress on the floor, 1 blanket, and a bucket for bathroom needs that was emptied once daily. No windows, no clock, no way to know if it was day or night. My world became that small underground room. My mother brought food once or twice daily, simple meals of rice, bread, and occasionally vegetables. She would unlock the door briefly, set down the tray, empty the bucket, and leave without much conversation. Sometimes she would try to convince me to accept the marriage, describing how comfortable life would be as Abdullah's wife, avoiding the reality that I would be the youngest wife competing with 2 others for attention and status. The isolation was crushing from the beginning. I had no phone, no books, no human interaction beyond my mother's brief visits. Days blurred together in the unchanging environment. I tried to maintain some sense of routine. Exercises to stay physically active, mental games to keep my mind sharp, prayers that felt increasingly hollow and mechanical. The psychological toll was severe. I cycled through anger at the injustice, despair about my situation, and terror about my future. Sometimes I screamed until my voice gave out, knowing no one outside our house would hear from the basement. Sometimes I cried for hours. Sometimes I sat in numb silence, unable to feel anything at all. My father visited occasionally to ask if I had reconsidered. Each time I refused, his disappointment turned colder. He made clear that I could stay in the basement indefinitely. He was prepared to keep me imprisoned for months or years if necessary. My stubbornness was inconveniencing him, but he would not be defeated by a disobedient daughter. After 6 weeks, something unexpected happened. Fatima, our Filipino housemaid, came to clean the basement while my mother was out. She looked at me with genuine compassion and whispered that she understood my suffering. She had been forced into early marriage herself in the Philippines. Before leaving, she quickly slipped something under my mattress and put her finger to her lips, signaling silence. After she left, I found a small smartphone hidden there. It had internet access and VPN installed to hide browsing activity. For the first time in 6 weeks, I had connection to the outside world. I immediately began searching desperately for help. Organizations assisting women escaping forced marriage, legal resources, any information about how to survive or escape my situation. During these searches, I discovered Christian websites with testimonies from Muslim women who had escaped similar circumstances. Their stories were captivating. They described encountering Jesus Christ and finding freedom, dignity, and worth they had never known. They spoke of a God who loved them personally, who valued women as his daughters, not as property. I had been taught that Christianity was corrupted religion for misguided Westerners. But these testimonies were from Arab and Muslim background women who had found something in Jesus that Islam had never given them. Their words resonated with my desperate heart in ways I couldn't ignore. Over the following weeks, I spent hours reading Christian testimonies and secretly watching videos of Muslim women who had converted to Christianity. A common theme emerged. They had discovered that Jesus offered freedom from oppressive cultural practices, that God loved them personally rather than as distant obligation, that they had worth as individuals rather than as property belonging to male relatives. One testimony particularly impacted me. A Saudi woman described being imprisoned by her family for refusing arranged marriage, exactly like my situation. She explained how reading the Bible transformed her understanding of God and women's value. In Islam, she had been taught that women were deficient in intelligence and religion, that their testimony was worth half a man's. But in Christianity, she discovered women were created equally in God's image, that Jesus treated women with unprecedented dignity. I began researching what Islam actually taught about women, reading verses and hadiths I had heard vaguely my entire life but never examined carefully. While imprisoned for refusing a polygamous marriage to a man nearly 4 decades older, these teachings felt oppressive rather than divine. Was this really what God wanted for women? The contrast with Jesus's treatment of women was striking. I read gospel accounts online. Jesus defending the woman caught in adultery, conversing respectfully with the Samaritan woman despite cultural taboos, appearing first to women after his resurrection. He valued women as persons with minds and spirits worth engaging, not as property to be controlled. I watched testimony videos explaining that Christianity offered relationship with God rather than just religious rules. In Islam, Allah was distant and unapproachable. But Jesus invited personal relationship, promised to hear prayers, offered intimacy with the divine that transformed lives. This resonated with my spiritual emptiness. I had performed Islamic prayers my entire life, but they felt mechanical, Arabic phrases recited without real connection. The idea that I could actually talk to God, that He cared about my specific circumstances and listened personally, was revolutionary. I began praying tentatively to Jesus during those isolated weeks. I didn't understand theology fully, but I started speaking honestly to Him about my fear, desperation, and desire for freedom. Surprisingly, I felt something I had never experienced during Islamic prayers. A sense of being heard, of speaking to someone who actually cared about my situation. I found websites with the Bible in Arabic and started reading the Gospels secretly on the hidden phone. The Jesus I encountered was completely different from the Prophet Isa that Islam acknowledged. He claimed to be God Himself, accepted worship, forgave sins. His teachings about God's love, about freedom from religious burden, about caring for individuals spoke directly to my imprisoned heart. One passage struck me powerfully. "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." I was weary from carrying cultural burdens my entire life. The offer of rest from a gentle God who valued me personally seemed too good to believe, yet I desperately wanted it to be true. After 3 months of imprisonment and secret Bible reading, I made a decision that would change everything. Alone in that locked basement in March 2019, I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. I didn't fully understand all the theology, couldn't articulate sophisticated arguments, but I knew I had encountered truth and love I had never experienced before. I prayed simply, telling Jesus I believed he was who he claimed to be, asking him to save me and somehow deliver me from this impossible situation. The peace that followed was profound. My circumstances hadn't changed. I was still locked underground, still facing forced marriage. But something inside me had fundamentally shifted. I no longer felt completely alone or helpless. I carefully hid my conversion from my family. Saudi Arabia was Islamic State where apostasy was both religious crime and social betrayal. If my family discovered I had become Christian, consequences would be severe. They might resort to violence or more extreme measures beyond basement imprisonment. I continued using the hidden phone to connect with online Christian resources. I joined support groups for women escaping forced marriage and for Muslim converts to Christianity. These communities provided practical advice alongside spiritual encouragement. Many members had successfully escaped similar situations. One contact particularly helped me. Sarah, a woman who worked with organizations helping persecuted Christians escape Middle Eastern countries. When I shared my story through encrypted messaging, she immediately began developing an escape plan. Her organization had helped Saudi women flee before, though each case required careful coordination. Sarah explained that leaving Saudi Arabia legally required male guardian permission for women under certain circumstances. My father would never grant permission. I would need to escape, which carried enormous risks. If caught attempting to flee, I would face severe punishment, and my Christian conversion would likely be discovered during investigation. The plan Sarah developed was complex. First, I needed to get out of the basement. This would require Fatima's help during a time when my father was away. Second, I needed to reach a foreign embassy that could provide protection. Third, I needed travel documents that could be arranged through certain diplomatic channels once I reached safety. Sarah's organization had contacts in the diplomatic quarter where several Western embassies were located. If I could reach that area, I would have some protection from Saudi authorities while asylum was processed. The escape was planned for June 2019, 8 months into my imprisonment. The timing was strategic. My father was scheduled to travel to Dubai for business meetings. My mother would be home but was less vigilant. During afternoon prayer time when household staff would be occupied, I would attempt to leave. Fatima agreed to help despite risks to herself. She would unlock the basement door during her duties and create distractions. She admired my courage to refuse the marriage and wanted to help me escape the fate she herself had suffered. The psychological preparation was intense. I was terrified of failure and of success. Leaving meant abandoning my family forever, becoming permanent exile, starting life with nothing. But staying meant eventual forced marriage or dying in that basement. The escape happened on June 18, 2019, exactly 8 months after my imprisonment began. My father had left for Dubai the previous day. That morning I prayed more desperately than ever before, asking Jesus for courage and protection during the dangerous attempt ahead. At 2:30 p.m. I heard the lock turn. Fatima opened the door, handed me an abaya and hijab for disguise, whispered, "Go with God," and disappeared to create distractions elsewhere in the house. I emerged from the basement for the first time in 243 days, my legs weak from months of minimal movement. I moved through our villa as quietly as possible, taking the servants' entrance. My mother was in her room for afternoon rest. The household staff were occupied with duties or prayers. I slipped outside into blinding afternoon sunlight, the first time I had seen the sun in 8 months. Sarah's organization had arranged for a driver to wait 3 blocks away, far enough from our house to avoid suspicion. I walked quickly, trying to look purposeful rather than terrified. Every person I passed felt like potential discovery. Every car seemed to be pursuing me. The driver, a Christian worker, greeted me quickly and drove toward the diplomatic quarter. The journey felt eternal. I expected police to stop us at any moment, expected my family to discover my absence and send people searching. But we reached the embassy district without incident. Sarah had coordinated with a European embassy that granted asylum to persecuted Christians. I approached the gates and spoke the words Sarah had coached me to say, "I am seeking asylum due to religious persecution. I have converted to Christianity and face death from my family and Saudi authorities. Please help me." The guards made calls while I waited in terror. Then a diplomat emerged, a woman who had been briefed about a potential Saudi refugee. "Come inside," she said gently. "You're safe now." As I stepped through the embassy gates, leaving Saudi soil symbolically behind, I collapsed emotionally. 8 months of imprisonment, fear, desperation, and secret faith poured out in tears of relief and grief. I had actually escaped. Jesus had carried me through the impossible. The embassy became my sanctuary while asylum was processed. My family discovered my disappearance within hours and tried everything to force my return, but the embassy refused. After 3 weeks of diplomatic negotiations, I was evacuated to a country with religious freedom. Today I work helping other Saudi women escape forced marriages and persecution. The basement where I was imprisoned for 8 months became the place where I met Jesus Christ. What my father meant for evil, God used for my salvation. I was locked underground for 243 days. But Jesus Christ gave me freedom that no locked door could contain, and that freedom was worth every day of suffering.